Hello friends, my name is Shivam from DevOps Schools and I will help you to enable your learning process in various technologies of DevOps, artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data and many more. This is our initiative to help you by sharing multiple tutorials and videos. And if you want any specific tutorials or any particular topic, then please do comment in the below comment section and I will help you with it. Also, please subscribe to our premium services on YouTube, which will give you access to more content and videos to enhance your knowledge about all these topics. Also, if you want me to help you with regards to the online trainings and classroom sessions by our qualified trainers, then please do write me at contact@devopsschool.com.
Are making calls to this very slow service, and all the 100 threads are busy waiting for response from S3. So now a call came to /A. Will it be able to handle now? All the threads are busy, right? So it appears that S1 cannot handle the request coming to /A. S2 is good and S4 is good, but only S3 is very slow. This slow service has consumed all the threads of S1. All the threads of S1 are busy waiting for response from this slow service. Now, a call came for /A or /C. They cannot be handled, right? Now, give me a suggestion or your solution how to tackle this problem. When one service is slow, how can I make sure that all the threads of S1 will not be used by S3? I want to somehow make a limit on what all threads, how many maximum threads can be used for S3. Is there any way? Okay, let me tell you the solution. Let me give you an example. I'll tell you. Let's assume that I'm working for a bank. In bank, we have call center, right? Call center will have a toll-free number. Actually, every toll-free number has some dedicated number of lines, let's say 100 lines. And in call center, there are various departments like savings card, credit card department, and maybe loan department. So whenever any caller calls this call center number and he'll press 1 or 2, let's say if he presses 1, he'll be connected to savings account department. So he presses 2, credit card, he presses 3, loan, right? So maximum how many lines can be connected like that for toll free? Let's say 100, right? So let's assume that whenever somebody goes for loan department, let's say the loan customer executive is taking more time he is taking to explain about the loan features. It is possible at some point that 100 loan customers can connect to this loan department, and all the 100 lines are consumed by loan customers only. Suppose if there's a new customer coming for credit card customer, then he will not be able to connect to this credit card department executive because all the 100 lines are busy and loan team is taking more time to explain the loan features. Now, can you suggest me what can be done? Among 100 lines, I can dedicate maximum 50 should go to loan, 30 should go to credit card, and 40 may go to savings account. Of course, total need not be 100. I'm saying max. So what might happen when 50 customers make call to loan, 50 customers will be connected to loan. 51st customer is again want to connect to loan, but maximum 50 are allowed for loan, right? So this loan customer will not be able to connect to loan department. But if a credit card customer comes, yes, these 30 still are there, right? So he will be able to connect to credit card. Only loan customers will be made to wait, or whenever a customer tries to call loan department, he can get a message saying all the executives are busy, try after some time. So he'll get disconnected. Okay. So this is the idea. How to apply the same in earlier scenario? What we can do is, on service 1, we can actually maintain a separate thread pool. Separate thread pool for each service invocation. See, this Tomcat thread pool is different, and this is another thread pool. This will be different. Now, whenever S1 wants to make a call to service 3, the main thread of Tomcat, will delegate to this thread pool, submit the task to this thread pool, and let it go. So the main thread is not actually making call to S3. The main thread is delegating to the thread in the pool. Now the main thread can wait until a max timeout for the thread to join. Suppose if this service is slow, what will happen? The main thread of Tomcat will wait until a timeout and it will come out. It will come out. It will not even wait for more time. All right. Because the service is slow, the main thread will wait maximum until this timeout and it will go out. And one more thing is, actually, suppose if this thread pool size is say 50, what can happen whenever a new request comes to /b, it is trying to delegate to this thread pool, right? Max is 50, so 50 requests, 50 main threads of Tomcat have delegated to 50 threads in this pool. Now 51st request comes again. This main thread will try to delegate to this thread pool, but the thread pool is rejecting. So the call, so the request coming to /b also will be rejected. So we are not allowing more than 50 calls to S3, right? So whenever S1 is trying to call S3, if S3 is slow, either it will get a timeout, or if the thread pools, all the threads in the pool are busy, it will get rejected by this thread pool. So S1 gets an exception. Of course, I told, whenever there's an exception or an error, we have to configure a fallback. Anyway, we'll execute the fallback and return gracefully, right? So actually, each service invocation having a separate thread pool. This idea comes from a pattern called as bulk head pattern. This is a pattern which says each service invocation can be configured with a separate thread pool. Hey, do we need to implement this bulk head pattern, etc. again? No need. Hystrix is internally taking care of it. Hystrix is implementing this pattern, bulk head pattern. Hystrix is actually implementing two patterns: circuit breaker pattern and bulk head pattern. So in this case, Hystrix will take care of this bulk head pattern. Why the name bulk head? Actually, the name bulk head came from ship manufacturing companies. Suppose if you see a ship, it will be like this in water. Inside water, there will be a lot of a big part of a ship will be inside of water like this. What if a ship going in the ocean, if it hits any rock or iceberg, what might happen? There might be a hole at the bottom of the ship. Water will enter into the ship and the ship will drown. Is it? So normally ship manufacturing companies, what they do is they create compartments at the bottom, multiple compartments at the bottom. And even at the head, actually they'll create a bulk part with compartments, multiple compartments. So if the rock hits this bulk head, which is having compartments, the water may go into one of the compartment, but it will not go into other compartments and ship will not drown. So in the design of ships, they create multiple compartments at the bottom, and because of those compartments, it appears like the ship has a bulk head, right? So that's the thing. It came from here. So here also we are having compartment of the pools. Yes. Yeah. Any queries? Yeah. Any queries? You can talk to me. No problem. Okay. I'll go ahead. Okay. Now we will actually use this bulkhead and circuit breaker in conjunction. Actually, what this service is slow, right? What will happen if lot of calls comes to /B? Service already slow. A call came to /B. The main thread of Tomcat made delegated to this thread pool, and this thread is waiting. So I configured a timeout. My main thread will wait until this timeout. If the response does not come until this timeout, the main thread will throw an exception called as timeout exception. Right. So if more number of timeouts are happening, Hystrix will be able to identify that this service is slow and will trip out the circuit. That means circuit will be opened in my logic. So that's how circuit will open if service is slow. Don't worry, I will show you all at code level after whenever I discuss about Hystrix. Just I'm trying to give you a overall picture so that when we go to the topic later, you will be able to connect everything. Okay, so that's about Hystrix. Now let us discuss about few more things. I will be having multiple services: service 1, service 2, service 3, service 4, etc. Right? Suppose if I'm developing all these applications using Spring Boot, I'll be having a jar file out of it, s1.jar, s2.jar, etc. Right? So normally the configuration in Spring Boot applications will be inside a .yml file, right? So the configuration also is bundled inside the jar. What if tomorrow I want to change my configuration? If I change my YML, again I have to build my application, create a new jar and deploy it, right? Whenever I want to change my YAML configuration, again I have to rebuild, right? So not a good idea. What I want is, I want all my configuration files to be kept in a centralized repository. centralized repository. All my .yml files for all my microservices, I want to keep in a centralized repository. And that repository should be versionable so that if I don't want the new configuration, I should be able to roll back to old one.
Hey viewers, our Master in DevOps engineering program can help you to hone the skills necessary to succeed in high-level DevOps positions. So, what are you waiting for? Enroll now and earn certification that show you are keeping pace with today's technical roles and requirements. Contact info is mentioned in the video sidebars and in the description box. Book your seats for the upcoming batches now.
Right? So maybe I can use some repository like GitHub repository or SVN repository or any of your repositories. Then whenever my application is booting up, it should get its configuration by hitting this one, right? So there is a requirement for one server called as config server. So config server is again a REST API. Simple. So it follows some conventions like /s1/ okay, I'll tell you later. So it has some conventions to identify whenever S1 is making a call, it should retrieve the configuration of S1 and give it back to it. And using that configuration, S1 should boot up. Similarly, whenever S2 is starting up, it should make a call to this config server and ask, hey, give me my configuration. The config server should be able to serve this configuration from the GitHub and it should start up. So like that, all my configurations are in a single place YML, inside the YML. So whatever changes I want to make, I can change without rebuilding the applications. Only restart might be sufficient, because whenever they restart again, they'll connect to config server and they will get all this, right? So I need a config server which will take the configurations from my centralized repository and serve the configurations. This is one more requirement, right? So that is one thing. And one more problem I'll tell you quickly. Yeah. Any queries?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So let's assume that I have multiple services, service 1, service 2, service 3, all these are services in my microservice based application, and here is my Eureka, discovery server Eureka. Now, whenever service 1 wants to talk to service 2, it will look up Eureka internally, of course, and use client side load balancing and then hit S2, right? But what if you want to expose this S1 to an external client? For S1, there might be multiple instances which are registered with Eureka. Do you want the client to look up Eureka, get all the instances of S1, use client-side load balancing, and then hit one of the instances? Do you want the client application to do all this? No, right? The client should be abstracted from all this. So what we need is a proxy where a client can make a call to the proxy by following some conventions. Maybe any request that should go to S1 should be following a pattern /S1/**/S2/** for any request that should go to S2. So client should make a call to this proxy application. This proxy should identify, okay, /S1/** means the request should go to S1. It should look up Eureka using S1, get all the instances, use client-side load balancing, select one instance and forward to that instance. So I need a proxy which can look up Eureka, do client-side load balancing and do it, right? So again, there is one, we need something like a gateway. Actually, this application or the proxy is acting like a gateway to all my microservices. So I don't need to write my own gateway. Again, Netflix has something called a Zool. Zool can be used as a gateway. So any client requests that should go to microservices should be going through this gateway, Zool, right? So tell me, this gateway, is it for internal service to service communication? If S1 wants to call S2, should it go through gateway? No, why should we take a round trip? For internal service to service communication, we use client-side load balancing. Only for exposing our services to an external client, we use gateway. And if I want to implement some sort of security or so, we can implement it at gateway level before the request even goes to services. Like maybe if I want token-based authorization or token-based authentication, if any request is coming without a token, the gateway can straight away reject it. And if there is a token, the token can be validated by gateway. And if everything is fine, then only it can forward to S1. Right? So that can be done at gateway level. So if we are implementing microservices using Spring, there's a module called as Spring Cloud module. Spring Cloud module is an umbrella project. Actually, it's a big project where it has a lot of sub projects like Spring Cloud Eureka, Spring Cloud Ribbon, Spring Cloud Hystrix, Spring Cloud Zool, Spring Cloud Config Server, lot of sub projects. So Spring Cloud is a big umbrella project under which it has a lot of other sub projects for Eureka, Ribbon, Hystrix, Config Server, Zool, etc. Right? So we are going to use Spring Cloud modules and we're going to develop our microservices using all this going on further. Okay. So that's about introduction to Spring or introduction to microservices, challenges, advantages, what all challenges we face and what all Spring Cloud offers us to overcome those challenges, right? Any queries we can discuss for next 5 minutes. So we're done with microservices. We'll go with next one. Before I go, let us wait for 5 minutes for queries. Yeah, tell me.
Shiva, all we are talking about in a theoretical manner, right? So how do we connect all these dots? Maybe that will give a good understanding to everyone.
Yes. So we have, going on further, we have a detailed discussion on how to create Eureka, how to register with Eureka, how can you look up Eureka, Ribbon, Hystrix, Config Server, all this we have. Step by step, we'll go ahead. First of all, so in this module, I will introduce you my use case and how to decompose your application using DDD approach. First, we'll do that. And before that, I'll introduce you to message-driven microservices. After that, we'll go with all these things. So even before we go to Eureka and all, we'll see a use case using DDD. How to do everything in detail. Whatever I have spoken theoretically, conceptually right now, it's a 1,000-foot overview. We'll be going into the details in each specific modules.
Yeah, that way people can easily relate and then they will come up with a lot of questions that time.
Correct. Definitely. That just a introductory overview about what we are going to do and all, right? But conceptually, did you understood whatever I have spoken conceptually? Anyway, practically I'll show you, but any queries you have, let me know, we can discuss.
So can you go back to the circuit breaker concept? We talked about the fallback mechanism, right? What happens if the main service goes down? So we only talked about the fallback mechanism for the dependent service, right? Or the
Correct.
circuit breakers. So what would happen if the main service goes down? How does that fallback applies to that approach?
What do you mean? In this case, the main service, let's say S1 is the front end facing the customer. If S1 itself goes down,
Not this one. Can you? I think we talked about one of the Amazon use
okay, in
case.
Amazon such service. See, first of all, when you are going with microservice architecture,
Mhm.
actually what I mean to say is complete failure is a disaster. First point, we should make sure that our services are highly available. Maybe if you are going with some clouds, high availability is definitely guaranteed. So we should make sure that main services should not go down. Here, when I say failure can be because of slowness. See, even a slow service also should be considered as failed, and it should execute a fallback after a timeout, right? So whenever I'm talking about failure, it can be a slowness or it can be a network failure. So I was talking about dependent. If main service itself fails, then the client will get an error. That we should take care by using high availability of the platform.
Right.
Like
HA,
okay. And definitely, whenever you are going with microservices, for any dependent service call, there should be a fallback. Otherwise, you're designed for failures, right? Definitely, you should have some fallback where you can exit gracefully. Okay.
So does it mean every service will have a fallback mechanism applied? Circuit close and open approach?
Yes. For whenever one service is calling another service, it knows what service it is calling, the corresponding fallback logic. Suppose
And
in
when the
S4, suppose if in S4 there are 5 endpoints /A/B/C/D/E. So the logic for each endpoint will be different on S4. So whenever S3 is calling /A, there will be a separate fallback logic. Whenever S3 is calling /B, there will be separate fallback logic. So for every service invocation, there should be some fallback logic which you should come up with. Otherwise, you are not designing for failures. You have to expect failures.
so when will the circuit breaker will close? Assume that the dependent one fails, right? The circuit will open, right?
Yes. Okay.
So when will the service know it get closed?
Yeah. So here in this case, circuit. Suppose if this is a slow service. That means if more than 100 requests are coming to the service, circuit is opened. After some time, the circuit, this S3, even though the circuit is open, the S3 should go and make a call after some time. If it is getting response quickly, then it will identify that this service 4 has become normal and the logic should close the circuit. Right?
That logic should stay in the user code level, or the pattern will.
The historics.
I mean, is it configurable? That's my question.
Yeah,
it
is
configurable.
Nothing in code, 0 lines of code. In historics, we will tell what should be the interval after which it should go and check whether service is good or not.
Okay. If you can,
Yes.
If you can show us all these details when we go through in detail the code, maybe.
Definitely, I have all this configuration. So I will show you in code. Okay.
Satish has some questions he posted. He wanted to talk about a little bit about the security. How do we implement security at?
Correct.
Both the levels, meaning the request comes through the zookeeper as well as between the microservice to microservice, maybe.
Yes. So normally if I have to talk about security between services, this is service 1 and this is service 2. See, if it is a web application, then we will be having a login page, and in the login page we'll submit data and we'll log in. But
Right.
let us assume that this is in our case, all the microservices are exposing REST APIs. Of course, there can be a web application which is having a UI also, which is client facing, right? But
So,
when I talk about services,
Shiva,
yeah,
let's talk about two different use cases one by one. Let's talk about the client-facing application, for example. Then we'll move on to the service-to-service call.
Sure. First, let me give you a little bit of detail about token based, then I'll come to this part.
That's fine.
Let me introduce first, actually the token based. What is token based? Then I'll come to that. Yeah, sure, definitely.
Hey viewers, trying to get into DevSecOps? Enroll for our DevSecOps certified professional programs and earn the certification that shows you are fit for these technical roles and requirements. Contact info is mentioned in the video sidebars and in the description box. Book your seats for the upcoming batches now.
So let's assume that these two services are there, right? How to secure? Because they don't have a web UI, right? So we should go with some token based mechanism. So what we should do is we should have an authorization server, right? So whenever S1 wants to hit S2, it should get a token from authorization server, and with that token only it should make a call. If S1 makes a calls to S2 without token, S2 should be able to reject that calls, right? So whenever S1 wants to call S2, first thing is it should get a token. To get a token, again, there are mechanisms, there are different ways you can actually get a token. In OAuth, there are different ways. I'm not talking about those ways right now. I'm just telling at a high level. You should get some token here from the authorization server, and the token will have some information about what all permissions or scopes this client
User
has.
specific.
This is a client. S1 is a client, right? Every microservice might be having its own client ID and secret, right? So based on the client ID and secret given to authorization server, it will give a token, and token will contain some information about permissions or scopes this client has. Then S1, whenever it is making a call to S2, it should send the token to S2. Now the S2 should be able to validate the token. Again, for validation, there are multiple mechanisms. One of the mechanism is S2 can go to authorization server and ask it to validate the token. Is this token valid or not? But again, it is a round trip to authorization server. But there is one more token called as JWT token or JWT token, which we will be discussing in security. If this token is of type JWT token or JWT token, S2 itself can validate if the token is valid or not if service 2 has a public key of authorization server, right? So S2 will be able to validate the token, and if the token is valid, it can have some configuration to check. Okay, the token is valid, that's fine, but is it having required scopes to access this particular operation or not? That means on S2 there might be operations like /b /c /d. /b requires some permissions, /c requires some permissions, /d requires some permissions. So now the request is coming to /B. Now there should be logic on S2 which should check whether the required permission is there in this token or not. So if everything is fine, it should be able to invoke the logic and give the response. This should happen in case of service to service communication, and each service is now responsible for getting a token. So this is a scenario where you don't have a UI, right? Suppose if you have a UI based application, right? Now, let's say there are services, service 1, service 2, service 3, service 4, like that. Okay. And now, let's say here is a gateway.
Right.
Now, any external client who wants to make a call to S1 should be able to actually go through gateway. Now, gateway should take care of authentication. And let's say again, I have my own authorization server, which will actually is responsible for generating tokens. Now, client will make a call to gateway. Gateway should identify that the user has not logged in. In our gateway, we should have some logic. Authentication mechanism we should have, right? So where the gateway will identify that the client is not logged in, client should be redirected to the login page of authorization server. Now, client, he will give his credentials to the authorization server login page and submits. Now, authorization server will check the credentials. If credentials are valid, then it will generate a token and redirect the client to the gateway. Now, gateway gets the token, validates the token, and if the token is fine, it will send it to the service. Now, on the service level, I should have authorization checks. On service, maybe the call might have come to /B or /C or /D. So here we should have authorization checks. Here this gateway has authenticated and make sure that there is a token, valid token. Then the token will be forwarded to S2, and S2 should actually be able to authorize in the token, is there a specific role or scope to access /B? If yes, it should allow, otherwise it should reject. Or suppose now S2 wants to make a call to S3. Now it should be able to send the token to S3. S2 should be able to send the token to S3, and S3 should again authorize. This is called as token relay. The token is passed from gateway to S2, S2 to S3. So authorization checks have to be done at each service level, right? This is how the scenario will be for securing your web apps. Okay, so yeah, so Satish, tokens are the ones which are valid for microservices. Certificate-based authentication can be done for web applications only, Satish. Certificates will not work for microservice to microservice communication. Tokens are valid because tokens will also contain the scope related details. Certificate will not contain, right? Certificate-based validation can be done for web applications. Yeah, anyway, when I am actually discussing about security, I have a topics on security here. When I am talking, there are various ways of authentication, certificate-based authentication, I can discuss here when I am talking about Spring Security, right? HTTPS, enabling HTTPS, everything I'll show before I go to OAuth. I'll discuss about that. Okay, clear? Any other queries from your side?
So one more thing, Shiva. So when we talk about the web application, right? So how does the CORS being addressed? CORS, cross origin?
Everything again, cross origin request share, CORS, right? Cross origin resource share.
Yeah.
That we have to enable in Spring Security what all domains to allow directly. So again,
Right,
in
so
Spring Security, there is a configuration, annotation is there, CORS annotation, where we specify what all domains to be allowed. So maybe whenever a client is calling from x.com domain, and if it is a web application, and this is belonging to y.com, right? So if web application or even REST APIs, if x.com domain is making a call to y.com domain, by default the browsers will not allow x.com domain JavaScript to call to y.com. So what there is specification CORS, enabling CORS, cross origin resource sharing, where we can just do in a configuration, allow the calls from x.com, allow the calls from a.com. So if we just configure, then only cross origin resource sharing will be allowed. So the calls coming from x.com and a.com only will be allowed. Others will be rejected by this REST APIs.
So we'll talk about in detail more when we discuss security.
We'll discuss about that in security, yes.
Right.
Okay. Shall we go ahead?
Yeah.
It's a lot of theory today, no problem. So I have 20 minutes. I'll just introduce you to the next topic. Maybe I'll not be able to complete this next topic, but I'll just give an introduction, basic foundation. Let us see. So the next topic is message-driven microservices using a module called as Spring Cloud Stream and RabbitMQ. I will just give you the basics today. Maybe code level, maybe on Monday or next session, we'll go through it. Message-driven microservices. Actually, in my use case, which we are going to see, I am actually using both REST-based communication and asynchronous communication using messaging. So this gives an introduction so that when I'm actually implementing my use case, you'll be able to connect everything. So my requirement is very simple. Application A wants to send messages to application B. What are the various ways? Of course, since we are writing Java-based applications, what we can do is we can have a middleware, a messaging server, where we can configure some destinations like queues. Whenever A want to send a message asynchronously to B, it will put a message in the queue. B will be a listener for this queue. B will receive it. Suppose if there is application C also, and whenever a message comes to this destination, application C also wants to receive it. Both B and C should receive it. Is it possible using queues? No. Queue is point to point. One message which is sent to queue will be received by only one receiver. Suppose if you want multiple applications to receive, then you have to go with topic, is it? Topic is a destination where one topic can have multiple subscribers. Both B and C are subscribers. Whenever application, this is a publisher we say now in this case.
Hey viewers, are you looking for formal training on SRE practices? Take our SRE program. This course will teach you how to successfully implement site reliability engineering in the modern day 24/7 services. Kickstart your SRE training today. Contact info is mentioned in the video sidebars and in the description box. Book your seats for the upcoming batches now.
Whenever a publisher wants to publish a message to all interested subscribers, the publisher will put the message into the queue, into the topic. One message going into this topic will be going to all the subscribers. So topic uses pub sub, publish, subscribe, pub sub model. One message will go to all subscribers, and in queue, one message will go to one receiver. Here we call the application A as a sender and B is a receiver in case of queue. This is what we know when we are using JMS. But if we are using JMS, only this is valid only for Java to Java, right? So if we want a Java application to send a message to Python or Ruby or .NET, anything, we can go up with one more thing called as AMQP server instead of JMS. AMQP, Advanced Message Queuing Protocol. So we can use some servers like Apache ActiveMQ or RabbitMQ, etc. Right? Since in microservices we might have to communicate with language agnostically, we prefer to use messaging using AMQP, right? So in AMQP, how it works, let me just give you an idea. In AMQP, we will not have like queues and topics. We will have a destination called as exchange. There are different types of exchanges again. Let us try to talk at a high level. This is an exchange. Exchange is a destination in the broker, just like a queue or a topic. Now, for this exchange, what I can do is on the server side, this is RabbitMQ, let's say. RabbitMQ is implementing AMQP. In RabbitMQ, what I can do, I can configure a destination called as exchange. Then I'll configure multiple queues, let's say QA, QB, QC. And I can bind the queues to exchange using some binding key. Let's say I want to bind QA with a binding key of A, and I can bind B to say key B, and I can bind C to star A, let's say, just for example. Now I have bound the queues ABC with multiple binding keys. Now, whenever a client is sending a message, in a message there will be headers and payload, right? In the header, there should be something called as a routing key. Let's say a client is sending a message with routing key as B. The message goes to exchange. Exchange, what it will do is, based on the routing key B, it will put the message inside this queue. And this queue can have receivers or listeners. They will receive this message. Suppose if the routing key is A, BA, I'm sorry, let's say routing key is A, then what all queues are matching? This is matching, and star A, this also is matching, right? So what this exchange will do is, it will put the message in both A and C, and the listeners or receivers for both of them can receive it, right? So we are getting the functionality of a queue and a topic also in this exchange, right? So now, once you understand the exchange and queues, what I want to do is I want to write my code so that I can send a message either to RabbitMQ or maybe ActiveMQ or maybe to Kafka, whatever it might be. Whether I want to send my messages to Kafka or RabbitMQ or anything, my code should remain same. Only the configuration may change. So I want to write my code in such a way that I should be able to send and receive messages from any of these servers like RabbitMQ or ActiveMQ or Kafka without changing my code. This is my requirement. How to achieve it, right? So there's a module called as Spring Cloud Stream. Spring Cloud Stream, which allows us to send messaging agnostic to the server, right? But this Spring Cloud Stream is developed on top of a module called as Spring Integration. Spring Integration. So I just need to give you some basics of Spring Integration before I go to Spring Cloud Stream. So let us spend some time today on Spring Integration. Okay. Let me talk generally. Let's assume that I have application A and application B. B is exposing SOAP API. Okay. And A wants to consume that SOAP API. How do we do it generally? For SOAP, there will be WSDL, is it? So by using WSDL, we generate code here, and using that code, we'll consume that, right? So I'm integrating my application A with B using the code generated by WSDL. So whenever I'm doing integration, I need to check how these two applications are coupled with each other, right? So is there loose coupling now? Tell me, between these two applications. Loose coupling means whenever some implementation level details change on B, if client A is not affected, then we can say both A and B are loosely coupled. So if A is consuming the SOAP web service, is there loose coupling between these two applications? No. Yes, actually. Let's assume that the contract doesn't change. Contract didn't change. The implementation may change, right? Suppose earlier it was implemented using Java, and now the same contract is implemented using .NET. Do you think the code of EA needs to change? No, right? There is loose coupling. But what about logical coupling? What do I mean by logical coupling? If I want to say two applications are logically coupled, the application A need not know who is the receiver, and receiver application need not know who is the client. If you are doing such an integration, then I can say that they are logically coupled. But in this case, if you are consuming, if your code is consuming B, the application A needs to know the endpoint URL of B. And application A should specifically know that it is talking to a SOAP web service because it has to create a SOAP message and send. So application A should know that it is talking to SOAP service. Application A should know that know the endpoint URL, right? So there is no logical coupling. Now, how do I achieve logical coupling? Let us see. Let's again say this is my application A and this is the application B. Now, in application A, this is my code. If I want to consume a SOAP web service B, what I need to do normally, I need to create a SOAP message. In my code, I need to create a SOAP message and send. So that is the reason why there is no logical coupling. So now if I want to achieve logical coupling, what I can do is somehow, if I can configure a in-memory queue in the application itself. Normally in integration terminology, in-memory queues, we call them as channels. You can think of it as a in-memory queue right now. If somehow I can configure an in-memory queue, then whenever my code wants to send a message, what it can do is instead of creating a SOAP message or REST message or JMS message, it can create a generic message. Every message will have headers and payload, right? Every message will have it. So I will create a generic message and then put that message into this channel. This is not a SOAP message or REST message or a JMS or AMQP message. It's a generic message in some format, standard format. Then what? If somehow I can configure a SOAP adapter, again, this is not in code, it is in the configuration SOAP adapter. Then what? Whenever any message comes into this channel, the SOAP adapter can take it, convert this generic message to a SOAP message, and it can make a SOAP call. I'll configure my endpoint details here in the adapter in the configuration. So now tell me, this code, is it logically coupled to the SOAP service? Yes, because in my code, I am not even creating a SOAP message, I'm creating a generic message. In my code, I am not configuring or doing any endpoint URL. So it will just give a message over this channel, right? And SOAP adapter will take care of consuming it and giving the response back. Now, what's the advantage? Tomorrow, if this service provider says, hey, we're going to stop support for SOAP, and same service can be accessed using REST, right? Now what? Do you need to change your code? No. You just replace the SOAP adapter with, say, REST adapter. That's all. Your code will still remain same. REST adapter, again, this is in the configuration, right? So your code is logically coupled to application B. Whether B is a SOAP application or a REST application or some other application, your code doesn't bother. Only in the configuration, the adapters may change. So that is the advantage of logical coupling, and you can achieve logical coupling using the channels and adapters, right? Now, quickly, let's assume that this is the application, and here in my code, I have some data to be sent to the third-party application, but I have a data in JSON format. But this application requires data in XML format, right? So that means before the data goes to this application, the JSON has to be transformed to XML. So what I can do is I can configure a channel here. Then if there is a component like a transformer which can take the JSON from here, transform it to XML and keep it in another channel. This is XML. Then from here I can have an adapter which can take this message out. Then I'm able to achieve this scenario, right? Like that. Maybe sometimes we need to do some filtering of data. So whatever data comes here, I want to filter some data and then put the filtered message in another queue. From here I can have an adapter, right? Or instead of adapter, let's say when the message comes here, conditionally I want to route that message to application B or application C or application D. Routing has to be done, right? So here I can have a router, a component called as a router, which will check some conditions and put the message on to either of these queues. So from here, this adapter will take a message to B, or from here, this adapter will take a message to C. This adapter will take a message to D. Our router will check some conditions and put the message or route the messages to corresponding queues from where the adapters are taking the message to third parties. Right. So we need a way to configure in-memory channels, transformers, filters, routers, and wide variety of adapters like SOAP adapter, REST adapter, SAP adapter, Salesforce adapter, file adapter, JMS adapter, AMQP adapter. We need some library or a framework which allows us to configure all these components. Then we can achieve logical coupling, right? So Spring integration is a framework which allows us to configure all these components and achieve loose coupling between the applications, right? So I told you that Spring Cloud Stream internally is developed on top of Spring integration. So we will see how two applications can exchange messages on top of Spring integration and using Spring Cloud Stream.
Thanks for watching. Want to study further? Join our training programs today.